These are the cheapest dedicated cinema lenses that you can buy right now. And as part of that, I think they are quite imperfect lenses, but they might be the perfect lenses for some people. And as part of that, I just want to dismiss the people that I don't think these lenses are for straight up front to save you time watching the rest of this video. To start with, I don't think that these are lenses for dedicated photography. I'll kind of explain that a little bit later in the video, but if your primary use of lenses is photography, I don't think these are the lenses for you. I don't even think they are lenses for people that are hybrid shooters that shoot 50% photo and 50% video. I still think there are better lenses for that purpose. They're also not for people that are afraid of manual focus, manual aperture lenses, because like pretty much all cinema lenses that you can buy regardless of price point, these are manual focus, manual aperture lenses. And I would also probably not recommend these lenses for dedicated YouTubers that are primarily filming themselves. Simply because of that manual focus aspect, it becomes much harder to create sort of your content or videos to manual focus and then put yourself in the right position. So who are these lenses for? Well, to start with, I was going to say that they are budget lenses for aspiring filmmakers. But since watching a few reviews about these lenses, what I've discovered is there are more experienced filmmakers and there are people out there using these cheap lenses on projects that probably the project themselves is worth 10 times what a set of lenses like this would cost. So I don't think they're strictly for budget filmmakers, but if you are on a budget, I think these do look really good for you. And I should also say that I think these are actually excellent lenses for what they call in Hollywood crash cams, which is essentially when you're going to take a camera and you're going to put it in harm's way and you want to get the highest quality image, but you kind of don't want to put your most expensive lenses at risk. I think even for professional video production and sort of narrative storytelling, I think this is an excellent set of crash cam lenses. Now, if you spend any time watching YouTube and you're into budget filmmaking, you've probably already heard of this series of lenses. They're called the SIRUI Nightwalker series of lenses. And there's a 24mm, a 35mm, and a 55mm. And SIRUI has teased that there are more lenses to come. I think there's probably going to be a further wider focal length, and there's probably going to be sort of a moderate telephoto length, probably 80mm or something in that range. These lenses can be bought individually or as a 3-lens kit, and you do get a little bit of a discount if you buy them as a 3-lens kit. You also get a dedicated carrying case for the 3 lenses. And I have been given a discount code for the SIRUI store direct, so I will put that below. And there's also some pretty good pricing on Amazon as well. So you can just compare those prices, just work out which one has the best price at the current time. And I want to disclose that SIRUI did send these lenses out to me at no cost to myself so I could make this video, but all opinions are my own and I have not been paid, and this is not a sponsored video. When you look at a set of cinema lenses, there's some obvious differences between a cinema lens and just a normal photography lens. And you'll see it's a much bigger lens. It has sort of these dedicated gears on the side, often has a much bigger filter thread. Generally speaking, it is a much heavier lens. And a lot of videos have talked about that already. But in this video, I kind of want to focus on the differences between a photography lens and a dedicated cinema lens like this. Some stuff that people really haven't talked about. And also it kind of explains the reason that the reviews on these lenses tend to be a bit mixed depending on who's reviewing them. To start with, I just want to talk about image quality. Now, when we're looking at a dedicated cinema lens, generally speaking, we're talking about shooting 4K video, right? 4K video is only 8 megapixels. This is a very different amount of resolving power that is required in a cinema lens when we compare it to a photography lens. Because sort of the average photography camera right now starts at 24 megapixels and goes up to 40 megapixels. So if you're shooting 4K video on these lenses, as long as they can resolve details that are equal to 8 megapixels, anything beyond that is kind of unnecessary and overkill. So while you can use sort of photography lenses for video and video lenses for photography, if you are buying a dedicated video lens, once you get a lens that can resolve 8 megapixels of detail, you're sort of done. Anything beyond that is really kind of unnecessary. So when you're shooting test charts, it's sort of high resolution 24 and 40 megapixel images, you're going to uncover things that would be a real element when you're doing photography, but tend to be completely irrelevant if you're doing dedicated video. So that's my first point. The resolving power of a video lens does not need to be anywhere near the resolving power of a photography lens. The next thing to keep in mind is when we are shooting a photograph, we are freezing a moment in time, and we're encouraging the viewer to look at that photograph and let their eyes sort of take a journey throughout the frame, finding the subject, the foreground, the background. And as part of that, we are really evaluating that image in a huge amount of detail in a way that we aren't when we're watching a video. When we're watching a video, to start with, unless the camera is locked off on a tripod, the frame itself is often moving. In addition to that, we're always videoing something that is moving, because a still frame would be sort of fairly boring. So we will often have the frame moving, and then we got the subject in the frame moving, and each of those frames are only showing for sort of a split second. So the evaluation and the way that our eyes sort of interact with the images coming out of a video lens or in a video is completely different than in photography. So we really have to evaluate these lenses in a completely different way than we do video lenses, because a lot of these optical imperfections that we see in video lenses are not only common in cheap lenses, they're common in lenses that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And I can remember watching a video, and I can't remember what channel it was, but it was a YouTube creator that had really been saving up and wanted to rent this high-end set of cinema lenses, and he was so looking forward to shooting this short film project with this really expensive set of cinema lenses. And he finally sort of set his budget lenses aside, got this really expensive cinema lenses, and he's looking through and looking at the image that was coming up on his sort of monitor that he had on site. And he's like, wow, there's kind of a lot of distortion in this, and there's more chromatic aberration than I expected. And what he found is that the cheap lenses that he was using were actually a pretty good substitute or copy for what these much more expensive lenses were. So what you'll find is even the more expensive Hollywood cinema lenses often have a lot of these optical imperfections that really are just part of what we're used to when we see sort of cinema lenses or things on the big screen. And really a big part of this is often the images are a bit softer on the edges of frame than they are in the middle of the frame, which you will find with these lenses. Often there will be some amount of distortion, sort of whether that be a little bit of barrel distortion or a little bit of pincushion distortion. It's generally more noticeable in the corners, which you will have on these lenses as well. Cinema lenses will often have a specific character or look to them, and you will often hear people talking about this look or that look when they're sort of referring to very expensive cinema lenses, which these lenses give you a very specific look as well. And the other thing you're going to find is cinema lenses are often not as high contrast as photography lenses, which once again is present in these lenses as well. So if you evaluate these lenses like a photography lens, you actually might not like them. But if you compare these lenses to other cinema lenses, even much more expensive cinema lenses, that's where you start to realize what an absolute bargain these are. And many of the optical imperfections and the look these lenses give you is present in much, much more expensive lenses. And this is a fundamental way that we really have to look at cinema lenses a little bit differently than photography lenses. And when we look at these lenses in that way, I think they measure up quite well, particularly given the price point. Now, when we look at each individual lens itself, what you're going to find is they have what pretty much all cinema lenses have in common. First of all, they have a consistent filter thread across the front of the lens, and they have identical sizing. So if you're using a matte box, you can just slide these into your setup, and they're all exactly the same height. They also have focus gears and aperture gears, which are in the exact same location. So you've got your sort of follow focus system, or you've got your ability to adjust your aperture. It is geared. It's in a sort of full cinema rig setup. You're going to slap that on, and you're going to be able to change your different focal lengths, and you're going to be able to not change anything else about the rig. They're all lined up perfectly. The other thing you're going to find about this set of cinema lenses, as well as all other cinema lenses out there, is they are not rated in f-stops, they are rated in t-stops. And the t-stops just guarantee that you've got the same amount of light hitting the sensor if you go from a sort of a T1.2 in this lens, and then you put this lens on and set it to T1.2, you're going to be getting the same amount of light hitting the sensor. And that's important because it allows you to leave all of your other settings in your camera the same, and you know you're going to get an accurate exposure. And what the T-stops really kind of takes into account is the fact that all of these lenses might have a different number of optics in them or a different number of glass elements in them in different groups. There's a bunch of things that affect how much light hits the sensor that are part of these lenses, which aren't just the aperture or the iris or how big the opening is in the back of the lens. And because of that, T-stop takes that into account to guarantee when you move between the different lenses, you're still getting the same light hitting the sensor, so you're going to be able to have the same exposure just by leaving all the other settings in your camera the same. The other thing these lenses do a pretty good job of is controlling focus breathing. And focus breathing is just an effect where when you're drawing focus from near to far or far to near, you get a zooming effect. If focus breathing is well controlled, it means that we can focus something in a distance and then we can draw the viewer's eye to something in the foreground just by changing the focus without changing any of the framing. This is super common in Hollywood and sort of all video formats. You see focus pulls used all the time. And if that image is also zooming in and out, it becomes quite distracting and it really sort of isn't very nice and cinematic. Now, in editing, you can work with this if you get a little bit of focus breathing, but I find some lenses are so bad it feels more like a crash zoom when you're actually doing a focus pull. Now, these three lenses all control that focus breathing quite well, which I think is important for cinema lenses. And ultimately, I think this set of cinema lenses represents great value and is perfect for somebody that's on a budget, somebody who wants to take their video production and storytelling to the next level. This is going to allow you to take any camera, your entry-level camera, rig it out like a cinema rig, use the follow focus system, and essentially be an entry point into that sort of cinematic or cinema rig workflow at a very, very low price point, because you just can't access lenses that have this set of features at any lower price. Not only does SIRUI make the world's cheapest cinema lenses, they also make the world's cheapest anamorphic lenses. And I've just thrown a video on screen now. Anamorphic lenses are lenses that give you that widescreen stretched Hollywood effect. And there's really no cheaper way to get into anamorphic video than checking out this lens.